past several months, Occupy movements have been springing up across the nation and the globe, but in mid-November, all eyes would turn to UC Davis. UCD students, outraged by the 9.6% fee increase approved by the UC Regents in early 2011, initiated a protest rally on Tuesday, November 15th. The rally was also held to demonstrate solidarity with UC Berkeley students who had been beaten by police officers during an Occupy Cal demonstration the previous week. On Friday, the now infamous pepper spray incident occurred. Since that day, UCD students, as well as members of the Davis community, have responded through peaceful demonstrations, including general assemblies and teach-ins. But while many focus on what should happen next, understanding why these events happened is also important. Two discourses that may be key in understanding what caused these events are militarization and privatization.
For military conflict or violence. So in this post 9/11 period, the militarization of American society, the American state, to justify the state of emergency that we're living in. And so the premise of militarization then is that the use of force, a threat of force, is necessary to rule a population. So that the threat of war or the use of force is often used as a means to pursue policy or political goals rather than using other nonviolent means of resolving issues.
The shift towards a more militarized campus itself, where police officers carry guns, for instance, I think dates back to the 1970s and a broader shift in American culture towards securitization.
One of the things we've seen, not just in the UC system, but in general in the last 10 years, is that the room to protest has been increasingly diminished, and the response to protest has been increasingly militarized in the sense that we're using techniques in a civil society context that in the recent past we would not have used in the civil society context. We're using a paramilitary policing technique. We're using the kind of techniques learned to control crowds in war zones. We're using the kind of techniques used to control crowds in prisons. And we're applying them in a civil society context. And the danger of that is it means that the response to dissent becomes both increasingly violent and increasingly rapid. And that's the militarization process, that there's this utterly destructive intervention against all kinds of dissent that's starting to go on.
Tahi, when she said that they had no other alternative but to call the police in to put down the tents because people had ignored their written request to put down the tents. So rather than using non-violent means of going out negotiating, having discussions, Katehi ordered the police to come in to squelch that dissent.
There's not really like a correlation between increased military policing and decreased crime. If anything, there tends to be an indication in the other direction. So as far as like for our community, for the university community, I feel like it would be much more effective to have people that secure us, but also that work with the community to make sure that we're all doing things that would keep us more safe.
I think the question is then, what are we going to do about the issue of privatization? And it's connected to the militarization of the campus as well. So how do we go about then dealing with this issue of privatization? The fee increases that are an integral part of the privatization. So the standard line that university officials say that because of the decline in tax revenue, therefore the university is in a crisis because state funds are not available for the university. And so privatization in the form of higher enrollments, increasing tuition is the solution. So it's posed as, privatization is sort of posed as a reaction or response to the crisis in the state budget. But rather, we need to think about this as being an actual aggressive strategy or practice of the university, the privatization, rather than a response.
Privatization is this larger concept of a public good transitioning from the public sector to the private sector. How we can see that happen in education today is the divestment of state funds from education and the supplementing of tuition and increasing tuition on students, showing that students are now investing more in their education than the public, which becomes problematic if we're supposed to be a public university and we're supposed to be advocating for accessibility and affordability. How students are now required to invest much more capital into the university.
Because like student fees go into a private account now. Like there's no technical allotment for how much of that has to go to like educational purposes. So like if the Mandavi Center has like repairs that need to be made, that money can go towards that, or construction or whatever. It doesn't have to like go towards paying professors or anything like that. Whereas like the money that comes from the state does have a certain percentage has to go to educational like purposes. So like obviously it benefits the university to get more student money, like tuition money, than state money.
The choices the administrators make increasingly make it an elite institution, an institution that you buy your way into rather than earn your way into through merit, which is what the original goal of the UC system was. Now, I haven't used the phrase a lot because I'm not entirely convinced that there's a conscious decision by administrators to privatize. That might be the end result, but they're faced with a real problem. The problem is that for year and year, for a decade or so, the state has underfunded the UC system. The money's gone elsewhere. It's gone to prisons, it's gone to tax cuts, it's gone sort of pretty much anywhere but education.
The current situation of the UC system reveals that meritocracy is actually a myth, because university, which is a state institution, should be accessible to everyone, but it is not because of the prices.
What I understand human capital to be, in the easiest sense, just kind of the individual worth each person is thought to have, and that is supposed to be the result of not only kind of inherent qualities, so maybe biological qualities, but also acquired qualities or acquired traits that one gets and accrues through education of various sorts. Primarily things like getting a college degree, the things you would learn in college, which I think actually undergirds the entire shift towards a neoliberal mode of organizing the world, one that is based upon privatized individual goods rather than kind of collectivized public goods.
Neoliberalism is sort of like the overall theoretical foundation that like the privatization of the university system is founded upon. So using neoliberalism is a very like critical and useful approach to like questioning why the UC system like legitimizes itself and like the raise of tuition.
When I went to UC as an undergrad, you really saw people, coming. Almost everybody was from California. And now in classes you see a lot more international and out-of-state students. And that's not a statement about quality or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But it is definitely a demographic shift. And so part of that is because the out-of-state and international students like basically pay more money. And so that's a response to the structural deficit, and you can see that I can see that in my classes.
I think that's Occupy Davis is trying to bring that into attention, that this is not simply a response, but that we can actively oppose or resist the strategies of privatization, which includes tuition hikes.
One of the things that we're really talking about is what is the university going to do to engage students and to engage a larger community about the whole issue of the campus economy and the lack of student access. How are we going to be able to participate in a dialogue about budget cuts where we have community members, students, faculty, and staff that are discussing the whole issue of cuts? Who is going to be cut and why? What are the priorities going to be? I don't really feel that we've had the kind of open-ended, transparent, critical dialogue within community that would need to take place, because we're really talking about not only the future of education, we're talking about the future of the citizenry of California.
I think this is one of those moments where an awful lot of people who thought politics didn't impact them are actually beginning to understand that politics and political choices do impact them, and that's a good thing.